A week after the terror attacks in Paris, the diplomatic and security repercussions continue to reverberate. Joining me to discuss the latest developments is Sam Jones, the FT's Defence and Security Editor. Sam, European ministers have been meeting to discuss border controls. What have they agreed?
Well, so far, as you say, Hugh, there's been this meeting today. The Schengen area, the free movement of citizens through Europe, is at the core of the problem with Europe's foreign fighters. And what they are trying to do is toughen up the checks that they are imposing as people, European citizens included, come back into the euro area. So typically passport checks when you've got a European passport are quite cursory. What they want to do now is have a much more systematic approach. That might involve scanning passports so that people's details are logged on a computer system when they're moving in and out of the Eurozone, and that information is then shared. Similarly, they're trying to toughen up something called PNR, Passenger Name Register, which is something for aircraft when you're flying in and out of Europe. At the moment, there is no way, no comprehensive system where passengers' details are shared and available for all European governments to scrutinise, and that's something they've actually been trying to get agreement on since the Charlie Hebdo attacks in January.
How much difference might this make? I mean, we've seen particularly the alleged ringleader of the attacks in Paris last week turning up in Paris when they thought he was in Syria. And French politicians have been very critical this week of what they call the passoire that is the Schengen zone, the sieve that it is. It just allows people apparently to come and go.
Yes, absolutely. And as I say, this is really at the heart of the matter. The issue in Europe with the foreign fighter problem is that any one government might have a handle on what their radical citizens are up to, but how do you then track the other governments' foreign fighters and their movements throughout Europe? All of these individuals involved in the Paris attacks appeared to have had some link to Syria. Some of them went to Syria to receive training and yet were able to make it back into the Eurozone without any kind of interruption to their activities or their travel. And some of them did that by moving through several different countries before they returned to France or Paris.
Moving on to the broader fight against ISIS, we've seen the French and the Russians move much more closely together in the action they're taking in Syria. What kind of other developments are we seeing now in terms of the international coalition against ISIS?
There's very much a sense that events in Paris have resulted in a change in terms of people's perceptions of the threat. The Russians, for example, are now bombing ISIS much more heavily than they ever were in the past in Syria. Previously, Washington and others were very critical of Moscow and said that its intervention in the area was purely about propping up Assad. And there is also a sense from Washington that Moscow is much more serious about some kind of political situation, some kind of political solution.
Well, in that context, we know that President Putin of Russia is going to Iran to meet Iranian leaders, and obviously Iran is also a big player in Syria. Is this likely to be a crucial development, do you think?
Well, actually, I think this is really the key issue that needs to be addressed. People talk about Russia and Washington and Europe and their kind of plan for Syria, but Iran is the other big player here. And there's really no sense yet of how Iran, which does have a seat at the negotiating table now, can be brought around to the same page as everyone else. Iran has been quite clear that they want to see Bashar al-Assad stay in power. And if he moves, then that really could spell a disaster for Iran's foreign policy. Syria is really at the front of it. You know, they view Syria and protecting their interests there and keeping the regime in power as the front line of the defence of Iran's domestic security.
Sam, thank you very much. And to follow all the latest news and development, please go to ft.com.